to the end of, well, I'll be very fast. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'll be presenting a paper on viability of autogas in Nigeria. This is work that was done late last year, just to look at the policy steps that the government was taking as regards switching from PMS to gas as automotive fuel. Next slide, please. So my outline is I'll just talk about what autogas is and what is not. Talk about the global adoption rate, a case for autogas in Nigeria, why do we need to switch? Sorry. Okay, talk about the supply, the autogas, or I would say LPG supply situation in Nigeria currently, the distribution network, and then we did some break-even analysis work for both LPG, CNG against PMS. And then, of course, ran some sensitivities on conversion cost, because that's a major issue. And we did look at emission, exhaust emission, to see which one is favorable to the environment. And then, of course, I'll conclude. Next slide, please. So what really is autogas? I've seen people, when they talk about autogas, it looks like it's all the gases. So autogas is really use of LPG for automotive fuel. It does not include CNG. I think in this space, people confuse autogas and what they call natural gas vehicles. Those are two different things. Now, if it is CNG fueled, it is called a natural gas vehicle. It's not autogas. Autogas is simply use of LPG, no matter the ratio, whether it's 100% butane, 100% propane, it doesn't really matter, or some mix. The important thing is that you're using LPG as your automotive fuel. So that's really what, in Nigeria here, I think our spec is 70-30. So that's 70% butane, 30% propane max. Although I know there's quite a bit of violation around, people are not following that prescription. Next slide, please. So the autogas use is growing very fast globally, but it's not growing here. If you look at the statistics, this is as at 2020, you will see adoption rates in Latin America has grown up, in Europe is quite high, and Asia Pacific is equally growing. Combined, as at that year, they were doing an average of about 24.4 million tons per day globally. That's the kind of numbers we have. And about 30 million vehicles have so far, as at 2020, been converted. 30 million vehicles. Most of them were not conversions. So most car manufacturers now have autogas variants for their vehicles. So conversion is just one way you can move from liquid fuels to gas. And globally, there are about 79,000 stations, dispensing stations. In Nigeria here, we have a very peculiar situation. We haven't quite gone the autogas way. So there is a bit more CNG dispensing infrastructure than autogas, and I will speak to that. Next slide, please. So I did say that the share of autogas in the transportation fuel mix is rapidly growing. If you look at that red line, that's what it shows. You can see that electric vehicles don't quite show, because there's so much talk about EV vehicles, right? The adoption rate is still the share of autogas was about 7.5% globally in the entire mix. So that, and it's grown more faster than what is shown here. So the question is, should we get on it or should we wait, right? But I will show the reasons why we need to move on. Next slide, please. So why should we adopt in Nigeria? Our gas is rich. Everybody understands what a rich gas is. So wet rich gas is available locally. The subsidies on petrol are becoming clearly unsustainable. So there has to be, the only way to reduce subsidies really and make the pain minimal is to gradually switch from PMS to some gas, whether it's CNG or Autogas. Any other step you take will have a huge shock on the system. So our expectation is that the Nigerian gas expansion program will drive a gradual transition from PMS to Autogas, at least in the near term, to not just reduce the subsidy, to minimize the shock, the impact a complete deregulation of the sector will have on the economy. It is very key that we do that. The PMS supply and distribution challenges we face, if you think about Abuja in the last couple of months, think of Lagos today, we do have scarcity, right? Now, when you have, and it is because we are hugely dependent on PMS. So when there is a shock or a break in that transmission, we feel it so much. Now, if you flip the coin and assuming you had a 50-50 split between Autogas and PMS, we will not see the queues we see today. Because the gas distribution infrastructure, especially for Autogas, is fairly advanced in around here. Okay, so cost advantage, we all understand the difference. The cost impact is significant. It is safer and less environmentally damaging, and I will show numbers that show that. The other thing is it will help us reduce import dependence. Today, approximately 98% of the PMS we use is imported. Now, a switch will help reduce import dependence. Because, yes, you will argue that today about 50% of our LPG is imported, but there is scope to ramp up that production to a level where it will help reduce our dependence on imported automotive fuels. So that is something, that's an opportunity right there. And of course, the conversion, and if you understand the Nigerian gas expansion, gas flare program, the idea was to convert flare gas in situ to some gas-to-market products, whether it's LPG, whether it's CNG, whether it's methanol, whatever you can do in situ, that was the thinking. Now, I talked about better LPG distribution infrastructure relative to CNG. I need to make that point. It's not better for PMS, but relative to CNG, yes, we do have a far better infrastructure. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just to give a sense of when I say we are gas rich, yeah, those are the pictures there. If you look at our production, we are doing about 7.6 to 8 BCF per day of gas as at last year, and probably a 50-50 split between NAG and AG. NAG is non-associated gas, AG is the other. Now, the important thing is about 60-70% of that is actually wet, which is liquids rich. If you take a typical gas here, you could get as high as 100 barrels on 1,000 scoff of LPG. So it's very, very rich. The other point I would like to make here is that we can really ramp up these numbers, right? And that will help the economy significantly. Right now, a whole lot of the flared volumes, a whole lot of the gas that they put in the transmission line have liquids that shouldn't be there. We could have liquids that we could have extracted and monetized separately. And I tell you what, the pipeline quality gas is not supposed to be liquids rich, because that creates problems, flow assurance issues in the pipeline. We load up the lines with liquids. So that has a significant cost to our operations as well. So there's a whole lot that can be done to take advantage of this resource base and relieve us from depending so much on PMS. Next slide, please. So this is just a look at reported consumption, PMS consumption for the country. You can look at the numbers. There are gaps in the data, but I just decided if you average this in the last couple of months, you're looking at something like 70 million liters of PMS consumed daily. Now, that's huge. Don't ask me if it is correct or it's not. Just recognize that that is official numbers, right? The question then is, if we only achieve a 20% switch, that will have huge impact on subsidies themselves. The subsidy numbers will go. I actually did some simulation on what that would mean if we did 10%, 20%, 30% switch from PMS to, listen, this picture will change significantly. Next slide, please. So what's the supply situation? Today, we're doing probably 50-50. If you look at the average in the since 2021, it's about a 50-50 split between imported and locally produced. And I've looked at all so we get about right now it's about 350,000 metric tons from LLNG. And then the other ones are small producers. The BRT NGL produces, Greenville does some. The PNG, MPDC already does. I think Zenergy does as well, but they are very small contributors to the mix. So this is an opportunity. We can increase local production of LPG, and that will help reduce the importation of LPG into the country. There are a few things that have happened. Prior to now, the bulk of LPG that came in through Lagos. So wherever it came from, because of infrastructure challenges, we had to go through Lagos, and that increases the cost and all that. But that has changed now. I understand the Bodo Road is almost complete. So when that is done, there will be a lot of movement across from LLNG. Okay. I've been told that time is, I think it's Prof that caused it. Shouldn't walk in and cut my time. Okay, so the important thing is there's opportunity here to increase local production, and that will help as we go through the adoption. Next slide, please. Okay, I did talk about the LPG infrastructure. At least we have stations all across. If you look at the picture, there's quite a lot of LPG presence across the country, as opposed to CNG. CNG is right now concentrated in a location. So getting it across the country will require significant investment in infrastructure. Next, please. So these are the numbers. So if you look at this, I'm using the break-even distance. Clearly, CNG gives you a better break-even distance over LPG and PMS, but LPG gives you far better, even better than subsidized petrol and unsubsidized petrol. So there's a clear advantage in switching from PMS to LPG, and if you can, to CNG, the advantage is even more, right? But like I said, the CNG distribution infrastructure is at its infancy. So if we're in a hurry as a country, we need to switch quickly to LPG, right? That's your fastest way to reduce your fuel importation volumes. Next slide, please. So I looked at conversion cost sensitivities. Right now, what the NGEP, they are carrying about 300K per conversion. And this is normal vehicles, right? If you did 300K, you're looking at 35,000 kilometers. That's if you're looking at regulated fuel price at 165. Now, if you look at the fuel without subsidy, it's only about 18,000 kilometers. So there's an advantage there. So one message this tells you is that the subsidy regime, the regulated price regime, is a disincentive to conversion, right? So if we intend to make conversion attractive, we actually need to deregulate fuel prices. So that's an important message there. Okay, next please. My time is almost done. So what's happening to LPG price domestically? There are challenges. Like I did say, we are producing about 50% and we're importing. The problem is even the 50% produced here is benchmarked to the Mont Belvieu price, which is an international benchmark. So even LNG sells to you locally, you're essentially paying international prices for it. And all the small producers are doing the same thing. So at all times, the prices will reflect the international prices. However, I believe that when we increase domestic production, we will get to a competitive market where there might be reductions in that price. The other thing to note is that if you look at this price, we're looking at almost above 400 naira per kg of LPG. About 48% of that is actually not commodity cost. So there's a significant infrastructure bottleneck that we need to work on to reduce that price. So there's a lot of add-ons that needs to be accounted for. Next, please. So I talked about viability of conversion increasing. Okay. So if LPG price, if we are able to get it down, of course, it becomes a lot more viable to convert. Next slide. So what will happen if government decides to underwrite the cost of conversion? It becomes even better. That's the message, right? So if we can find a scheme, not driven by bureaucrats, that allows the government to pay for the cost of conversion, all of us will go and convert immediately, because really, the case is so clear. Next, please. I looked at the break-even distance across countries and compared with Nigeria, right? So if you look at all the countries there, except for UK and Turkey, I think we are very, very competitive. In other words, the break-even distances are much lower. For the regulated petrol, it's even like, it's 20,000. I think it's actually 18, if you look at it, 18,000 kilometers. So we are competitive. There's a case to be made here that we should. If all these other countries that have much larger break-even distances are converting at the rate they are. Next, please. Environment, what does this do? Emissions. So this is a study done by some guys in 2009. It shows that there are significant environmental benefits burning LPG rather than PMS. And the numbers are there. And I think I will wrap up. Next slide, please. So, LPG has several benefits. It's low cost, it can be locally produced, it helps us eliminate PMS subsidies, safer for the environment. But to do that, conversion, to make it very attractive, PMS subsidies needs to go. Government needs to look at a scheme, maybe a tax credit scheme like is done in Europe, that will allow them to subsidize conversion costs. And then, of course, we need to work at attracting investment in the LPG production space. Autogas conversion will indeed be beneficial to Nigeria, but we need to design a program. I'm not clear what the Nigerian gas expansion program is doing, but we need a program that everybody understands, and we can roll that out. And hopefully it will be private sector driven, not something that some bureaucrats will be driving. Thank you.